Hello, I'm Peter Freeth and I'm going to be taking you through this online learning course which is called Decoding Language for Coaches, also known as How to Discover What Your Client is Really Saying, and also known as How to Amaze Your Clients with Your Telepathic Insights into Their Deepest Secrets and Wildest Dreams. Now right now you might say that you are a good coach, even a great coach, and that's probably true. But it's not enough, because you've been taught to ask questions. You haven't been taught to listen. Now you might think that's outrageous because, of course, you do listen. You listen very carefully. The problem is you're listening to the wrong information. So information is made up of two parts. It's made up of structure and it's made up of content. Structure tells us how communication works. It tells us how things fit together, what to expect and when to expect it, so that we know what meaning to make out of the symbols, the words and the images that we're surrounded with every day. Without structure we couldn't understand, because themselves in enough, not words are. Let's take three very simple words: cat, sat and mat. You've spent your whole life knowing what these words mean. They're very simple, very obvious. But what event do these words describe? Now you probably get a picture in your mind, or you probably get a phrase in your mind. And if you get a picture in your mind, I'm guessing it'll be similar to one of these two. But which one? From that information, the three words, cat, sat and mat, which of these two pictures seems the best fit to describe the event? You're probably thinking the one on the right, the cat sat on the mat. The problem with it is that that information was not contained within the three words. That structure, that sequence, the cat sat on the mat, wasn't contained within the information I gave you, the words I gave you. It was contained within your experience, your life experience of knowing that cats sit on mats. Mats don't sit on cats. As we'll come on to discover, a mat can't sit on a cat anyway, because a mat can't act, it can't get there by itself. Someone or something has to place it there. So someone could place the mat on top of the cat, but the mat can't sit on the cat. Let's try three different words: push, John and Mary. Now it's not so clear, is it, which order they should go in, what structure they belong in. And this leads to the typical kind of letter that a parent might receive from a school. Dear parent, today there was a pushing incident. John and Mary were involved. Please give this your immediate attention. The headmaster. It doesn't tell you what you really want to know. What you really want to know is who pushed who. And of course, if you ask John and Mary, they'll probably give you different versions of events. Now, every statement describes an event, and events must be represented as sensory data. There must be something that you can see or hear or feel, or represent in any one of your at least 22 different sensory systems, which are all synthesized together by your brain into one seamless sense of reality. And events must be represented as sensory data because that's the only way that you have of knowing anything about the outside world. All the information that's in your head, the entire life experience that you have, could only have gotten in there through your senses. So it can only be represented through your senses. Every statement must contain three elements: a subject, a verb, and an object. And this is true for every language in the world. Some languages, the verb and object are reversed, so the sequence is subject, object, verb. But the point is that the subject always comes first. It has to come first, because without that we don't know which element, which actor within the statement is the one performing the action. So a subject is the actor, it's the active, doing, living, thinking entity which we're focusing on. Strictly speaking, only a person or an animal, only something with a mind and intention can be a subject. Although linguistically we can swap things around, and that's where it gets a little bit confusing. The object is the recipient of the action. It's the passive entity which has been acted upon. And so the verb is the relationship over time between the actor and the person or thing it is acting upon. The verb is the action. It's the doing word. It's telling us what is happening. It's telling us what the relationship is between the subject and the object. So the subject always comes first, otherwise we can't work out what's happening. The structure therefore creates the meaning, and the content simply provides a specific example of that. So in those three words that I gave you earlier, cat, mat and sat, you innately recognise cat and mat as things, objects, and you recognise sat as an action. Because you recognise those words, you've learnt those words, you know what they mean. And so out of those three words, cat, mat and sat, you know that there's only one of two ways that those words can be sequenced and make sense. You couldn't think, for example, the sat cat on the mat, or the mat cat on the sat. You know that that doesn't make any sense because you know what the words mean. How would you cope with words which are less familiar? What about the words greepling, snart and floop? How do these fit together? What's happening? What's the event that's being described? So what is happening here? We don't know. There isn't enough information in those words because they're not familiar to you. They're not in your dictionary. They're not connected with experiences that you've had. What event is being described? You've never seen an event that's been described in this way. Now, obviously, a floop is greepling a snart. You can see that in the picture. Unfortunately, you can also see that the snart is chuntling the floop. Poor floop. You now know what the words floop, greepling, snart and chuntling mean. You were able to work that out from the structure, and given a very, very simple image, you were able to figure out roughly what was happening and which actor or which entity was which. So let's have a big hand for our performers, floop and snart. There they are. Thank you very much. Content. Yes, thanks for reminding me. What about content then? Well, content is what you've been listening to in your coaching sessions. Content only tells you details about the current example, and the client will give you the same information over and over and over and over and over and over again. Every time you ask for another example, every time you say, tell me more, every time you say, tell me about that, or give me a for instance, or can you give me another example, they'll just tell you the same story over and over and over and over again. The same structure, different time, different people, same structure. Because the content isn't where the problem is, it isn't where the change needs to happen. The structure is where the change needs to happen, and the structure is where the client is not getting what they want. So let's have a look at a real example. Here's something the real coaching client said. My life is full of emotional dramas and negativity. Feels so misunderstood. People appear not to hear me or my opinions. So let's let you read that for a moment and think about where you would focus. If a client said that to you, where would your attention go? Where would you focus? What would you ask about next? So how would you approach this? Which areas do you focus on? Would you focus on the emotional dramas and negativity? Would you focus on them feeling misunderstood? Maybe you'd focus on their idea that people don't listen to them. Now, if you've already worked out that they didn't actually say the third one, they didn't say people don't listen to me, then well done. My life is full of emotional dramas and negativity, feel so misunderstood, people appear not to hear me or my opinions. It's not the same as saying people don't listen to me. So let's go through the structure of the language. The first thing we notice is my life is full. Now, you probably ignored that. You probably thought, well, they just mean that it happens a lot. But think in terms of taking the language literally. Life is not a container. It cannot be full. How can your life ever be full? Can you not fit anything else into your life? My life is full of emotional dramas and negativity. So they're talking about life as if it's a container that can't hold any more. Its capacity is limited. There's no space for anything else. Now what happens when life overflows? Let's look at the next line. Feel so misunderstood. Now you probably heard that as an emphasis. Oh, I've been so busy that I don't know what to do myself. I've been so busy that I haven't sat down all day. Oh, the meeting was so boring that I could have chewed my own arm off. So we take it as an emphasis, but it isn't an emphasis, it's a threshold. So is a threshold. I feel so misunderstood. And then they leave a gap. They don't finish the sentence. I feel so misunderstood that what? I feel so misunderstood that I what? Feel so misunderstood that I could, that I want to, that I do what? So again, this is causing us or pointing us in the direction of asking what happens when life overflows. It's probably not a question you've ever asked. And the final line, people appear not to hear me or my opinions. Appear is something you see, but hear is something that something that you hear, obviously it follows a sound. Appear and hear are both effects. They're both the results of something. Something must be present in order for it to appear, in order for you to see it. Something must have made a sound in order for you to have heard it. So people appear not to hear me or my opinions. Puts the speaker in the passive, it puts them in the object position. Now logically, they have to be in the subject position because they have to be doing something, taking action. But the way they've expressed themselves, they've put themselves into the passive object position. People appear not to hear me. So we've got a conflict now between the visual and the auditory. Here follows a sound, maybe in this instance a word or a statement. So what we might ask is, what does listening look like? How can people appear not to hear me or my opinions? So this tells us that overall the speaker's caught in a cycle of frustration caused by their failure to express themselves. Blaming other people is a red herring. And they're blaming other people because they're saying my life is full of emotional dramas and negativity. Like, how did that happen? I didn't put them there. Feel so misunderstood. Other people misunderstand me. It's not my fault. People appear not to hear me or my opinions. Nobody listens to me. Oh, by the way, somebody did once ask me, what is a red herring? So I'll just explain. A red herring is, it's a colloquial phrase meaning a misleading clue. This is very important because you might say, well, the client doesn't intend to mislead me. But they kind of do because they're misleading themselves. Because we've also got this peculiar little phrase right at the very end here, me or my opinions. How is hearing a person different to hearing their opinions? Do those opinions only serve to get attention from others? Are they connected with the emotional dramas and negativity? So does this tell us overall the speaker is voicing opinions in order to start arguments which then demand attention because the speaker can't tell when people are listening? You see, when people listen, they don't do much. They might look at you, they might not. So if you can't tell if someone is listening, you have to actively test them. You have to provoke a response. Now this is something that happens in computer networks. It's called polling, where the computer will ask another computer if it's got any information for it. Do you have anything to send me? So rather than just assuming if someone's quiet, they've got no information to send, we ask. We do it when we have elections. Rather than just assuming that if nobody speaks up, they must be happy with the way things are, we have an election. We ask them. They go to polling stations. So if we don't know an answer, we ask for it. So if this person doesn't know that people are listening, what they're doing is voicing opinions that create conflict in order to get attention, in order to check that people are listening. So if we want to genuinely support this client and create change, we have to focus on what's under their control. We can't control a life where other people are creating emotional dramas. We can't control whether other people misunderstand or not. We can't control how other people appear. We can't control how other people choose to hear or listen or not. So in this case, their behaviour of provoking responses in order to test their value in a relationship, that's what they can control. Now, instead of assuming that the speaker is the victim as they have portrayed it, we see a very different picture emerging. And that does two things for us as a coach. Number one, it gives us a very different direction to go in, much more accurate, much more precise. We will get to the heart of the issue much more quickly. Secondly, this creates a very different relationship with the client where you're not buying into their story. You're not saying, oh, it's terrible that people misunderstand you, and how could you express yourself better? How could you be more assertive? How could you calm the emotional dramas? How could you take yourself out of the situation, and how could you practice your resilience and your peace of mind and your mindfulness? They're all approaches that you might take, but they're a waste of time because they're not answering the specific issue which is causing the problem. That being, the person is provoking responses in order to know that they are valued. So what? What we're talking about is elegance. Your client will tell you everything that you need to know in the first statement that they make to you. How you then use that information gives you complete flexibility in your style and your relationship. Your coaching sessions will have greater impact, your clients will enjoy greater success, and you will find coaching so much easier. Because in terms of making changes and the work that you're doing to help your clients to make changes, if you are listening to content, you are wasting time. The structure is what causes the problem. The content is just one example of the structure. And your client will tell you the same story over and over again as the structure repeats. And this is what stops your client from making changes. The structure of your client's life experience, literally the wiring in their brain, is what stops them from making the changes they want, is what stops them from getting what they want out of life. The language and the structure of the language mirrors exactly the structure of that experience, and therefore that's where we need to focus our attention. So in this program, you're going to learn the structures of language which enable you to decode the client's internal experience. You'll be able to make changes without having to ask for any more content or examples. You'll save yourself time. You will enjoy far greater impact as a coach. Of course, it goes without saying that you will impress your friends and be the successful and valuable coach that you set out to be, that you always set out to be from the beginning, why you got into this line of work. So what's next is signing up for the online training and getting a copy of Coaching Excellence, which is a book that I've written for coaches, which has a lot of this content in it and the detailed structures of language that we're going to be working through over the next few modules. You're going to complete the training at your own pace and in your own way. And if you want, you can practice with other coaches in the Facebook discussion group. So, thank you for joining me at the start of this very exciting journey, and I look forward very much to working with you.